What if I told you that England's most celebrated queen, the legendary Virgin Queen, took to her grave a secret so shocking, so grotesque, that it was hidden twice? Once beneath the cold stone of her coffin, and again beneath the silence of everyone who saw it. Behind the powdered mask, behind the jeweled gowns and thunderous speeches, her body was falling apart. Poison, deformity, maybe even something unthinkable. And when her attendants prepared her corpse, they found something so disturbing that 400 years later, we're still not allowed to look directly at it. And the greatest mystery of all, it's still sealed under Westminster Abbey today. This isn't just about the death of a queen, it's about the collapse of a myth, the destruction of the story that held together an empire. So let's peel back the layers of history and walk into that dim chamber at Richmond Palace, where Elizabeth Tudor's last moments concealed a nightmare that still haunts her legacy. Picture it. The year is 1603. Elizabeth I, the Golden Queen, once the fiery young monarch who stared down the Spanish Armada, now lies in her bedchamber at Richmond Palace. The heavy velvet curtains are drawn. The room smells of candle wax and sickness. Her body is wrapped in red royal cloth, but her face, usually painted into a mask of eternal youth, looks pale and slack, more like a wax effigy than a living queen. She hasn't spoken clearly in days. Sometimes she whispers in riddles, sometimes she stares into the distance, trembling, refusing to lie down. Rumors swirl. Has she gone mad? Was she poisoned? When her doctors attempt to approach, she snaps at them, refusing their touch. One whispers prayers, another crosses himself. They can see it, something is horribly, horribly wrong. But nobody dares say it aloud. Because Elizabeth is not just a woman. She is England itself. And yet, when they begin to unfasten her corset and peel back the layers of silk and paint, the illusion begins to collapse. The smell hits first, a sour, rotting odor. Beneath the corset, her flesh is bruised and blistered, spotted black and green like fruit left too long in the sun. Wounds hidden for years are exposed, some still bleeding, some scabbed, all that masked with powders and perfumes. This was not simply an old body. This was a body slowly poisoned over decades. Her attendants stand frozen in horror. One mutters that her body has been eaten alive. Another claims it's divine punishment. But no one dares to write down what they see. Because if the Virgin Queen's body was deformed, diseased, even monstrous, it could shatter the entire Protestant myth of divine rule. What was beneath her white paint was never meant to be seen. And it almost never was. For decades, Elizabeth had used a dangerous cosmetic called Venetian Truce, a mixture of white lead and vinegar. It gave her the smooth, ghostly complexion that became iconic, almost divine. Portraits praised her ageless beauty. Poets wrote that her skin glowed like marble, but the truth was grotesque. That same lead seeped into her pores, poisoned her blood, and eroded her face. When warm cloths peeled away her final mask, the attendants saw skin blistered and discolored, patches of black rot, flesh hardened like leather in some places, oozing in others. Her famous hairline had receded almost to her crown, lesions opening across her skull. This wasn't beauty. It was chemical warfare against her own body. And the most chilling part, she knew. Physicians warned her repeatedly that the paint was killing her. But Elizabeth refused. To abandon the mask would mean showing weakness, mortality, her human side. And that was something the Queen of England could never allow. She chose the mask, even as it consumed her. But the damage went deeper than her skin. Behind locked doors, physicians dared a secret examination of her body. They found her liver hardened to stone, her kidneys blackened and brittle, her abdomen leaking a dark, tar-like fluid that clung to their gloves. They had no words for it. They called it the wasting of the royal core. Today, we know it was the inevitable result of years of lead poisoning. Her body had been corroding from the inside out. And there was more. Her spine, once held proudly upright by iron corsets, was twisted and bent, curved into a cruel arc. Her ribs were compressed and distorted from decades of tight lacing, some collapsing inward. And then came the discovery that chilled them most. Near her left breast, a festering ulcer, raw and bleeding. Whether it was cancer or infection, nobody knew. But one thing was certain: Elizabeth had hidden it for years, binding it in secret, never allowing her physicians to see. Why? Because any imperfection in the body of the monarch could be twisted into proof that God had withdrawn his blessing. And if God abandoned the Queen, he abandoned England. But the most unsettling discovery of all lay in the very organ that defined her legacy, her womb. Elizabeth had been celebrated as the Virgin Queen. She never married, never bore children. To the public, it was a noble sacrifice. She was wedded only to England. But in death, her body may have revealed a different truth. Her uterus, attendants whispered, was shriveled, parchment dry, barely recognizable as human tissue. Some said this was divine confirmation of her chastity. Modern medicine suggests another possibility: a congenital disorder, a hormonal imbalance, perhaps even a syndrome that made pregnancy impossible. Was Elizabeth's virginity not a choice at all, but a biological inevitability? Could her famous refusal to marry be less about politics and more about a body that had betrayed her from birth? If so, the greatest political performance of the Tudor dynasty was not a choice, but a necessity. And yet, this still wasn't the most shocking theory whispered after her death. In a village called Bisley, a strange rumor had lingered for centuries that the real Elizabeth died as a child, and a boy was secretly placed in her role to protect England from Henry VIII's wrath. The so-called Bisley boy legend. Ridiculous, perhaps. But the attendants who saw her corpse noted odd proportions: narrow hips, long limbs, a broad rib cage. Some whispered about missing or ambiguous anatomy. None of it was written down in official records. But the silence itself only fueled suspicion. Was Elizabeth hiding more than disease? Was she hiding her very identity? The panic at court after her death suggests something was indeed being concealed. Guards posted outside her chamber. Attendants dismissed and scattered across the realm. Physicians sworn to silence under threat of death. No autopsy. No public viewing. No eulogies that mentioned her condition. Instead, her body was hastily embalmed, sealed in a reinforced coffin, and buried under layers of pageantry. The message was clear. The myth of Elizabeth the Glorious must survive, no matter what truth rotted beneath the crown. And so, her tomb remains sealed. Historians and forensic scientists have begged for permission to examine her remains. DNA testing, CT scans, chemical analysis could solve the mystery once and for all. But the Church refuses, the monarchy refuses. For centuries later, Elizabeth I is still protected, still untouchable. Why? Because her legacy isn't just history, it's national identity. It's the foundation of the English Reformation, the symbol of divine Protestant triumph, the dawn of empire. To expose her body to risk proving she was deformed, infertile, poisoned, or even not who she claimed to be would be to undermine the very myth of England itself. So, we are left with whispers, letters half burned, portraits that grew increasingly androgynous, attendants who lived out their lives in silence, and a coffin sealed tighter than any other resting under stone in Westminster Abbey. Some truths, it seems, are too dangerous for kingdoms to survive. And Elizabeth Tudor's darkest secret, whatever it was, remains locked away for centuries later.